How good is the bow in Dying Light the Beast on brutal difficulty? Well, let's find out. Let's do some basic breakpoint testing here. Alright, so a single fully charged shot against a helmeted enemy did not kill. So right there is the difference between the bow and the crossbow. The bow can kind of excel at killing unarmored, non-helmeted zombies and humans, whereas the crossbow can easily one-tap those. And another weird property of the bow is you can shoot it completely from the hip, because the crosshair, when fully tightened, becomes basically 100% accurate. Like, your projectile is more or less 100% accurate. And there's also no drop at all, which is very strange. So if you go attack something at a far distance, you can one-tap it, assuming that it's, you know, able to be one-shot. Now, there are two alternate ammo types. There are fire and shock arrows. So this required, this guy here with the helmet took 2 shots to kill, which still isn't bad. It's still pretty quick. You also do drain stamina when using the bow, and you can ADS to get a zoom. And the zoom, like, you don't really have to use the iron sights on the zoom, you just have to look at where the crosshair is. The bow definitely excels when fighting low HP targets, but against enemies like bosses, it's not as good as the crossbow. But generally, I like to combo the crossbow with grenades, and you could combo the bow with grenades against bosses as well. I usually like to throw like a Molotov, and then, you know, set the boss on fire, then start hitting them in the face with bolts, ideally. But you can see here, like, how quick the bow is at taking out like weaker enemies, but against bosses it can be hit or miss. Its base damage is decent, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have like that big burst you want. Because the big thing with boss fights, especially in actual boss fights, because this is more of like a random boss that just happens to be in an area, there's going to be a constant stream of enemies coming at you, so you're going to have to deal with them as well as the boss. And you're going to want as much burst damage as humanly possible. So, let's just see how many arrows it takes. It's taking quite a few. The other thing, too, is you're draining out your stamina, which means that if other things, like if other zombies are swarming you, you don't have dodges and you have fewer resources to work with. So you're basically trading that faster fire rate for lower base damage and for stamina drain, which can hurt you and get you killed, especially in Brutal. Alright, we did kill him in a reasonable amount of time. The other thing I've noticed too, and this might be a bug, is that I'm not really getting any of my arrows back when I hit an enemy, but if I hit the environment, I have like a decent chance of getting arrows back. So I think that's a bug, so I'm pretty sure you're supposed to be able to recover arrows. Like you can see here, here's an arrow I missed, but all the arrows that hit just like completely disappear. Like, there's no arrows in any enemy's heads, and there's no arrows in any of the bosses, so I think either my game or my save file is bugged, or the recovery rate on arrows is bugged right now. So that may not be the case in the future. I would assume they're going to address that or patch that if it is a bug. Let's go over the crafting costs of arrows and stuff. So for arrows, you have base arrows, 10 scrap, 2 feathers to make 4. Fire arrows just sets the target on fire for a short duration. You're looking at 15 scrap, 5 resin, so it doesn't use alcohol, it uses resin, and then 2 feathers for 2 arrows, fire arrows. And then for shock arrows, you're looking at 15 scrap, 5 wiring, and 2 feathers. And the shock effect has like a small AoE, so enemies near the targets will get shocked. If you do headshot and kill the target, the enemies near the target won't really be shocked for very long, because if the target dies, usually the effect kind of diminishes quickly. Or at least that's what it seems to do. So those are the arrow types. To switch arrows, you have to hold down the weapon change button for the category. So in my case, it's 3. And then I have to scroll to select the new arrows. And then once you do, and you shoot one, you have a new arrow. One thing I haven't tested... Okay, so you can't recover fire arrows. I would assume you couldn't, but it's confirmed here you cannot recover fire arrows. They just stick in the wall and that's it. So those are the main arrow types. Now, should you craft the alternate arrows? It's completely up to you, but I would argue that if you want fire, Molotovs are better. Now, unlike with the crossbow bolts, which do use alcohol, the fire bolts, the actual fire arrows just use resin, but it does still use 5 resin, and resin and alcohol kind of go hand in hand for fire effects. So I would still argue Molotovs are much better if you want to set things on fire consistently. You also get some crowd control with a Molotov. You can hit a boss and hit the adjacent enemies, setting them all on fire, dealing good base damage, plus the damage over time. And then for shock effects, you are much better off crafting shock knives. They deal way more damage in an area, like in a radius, and they still have good base damage that actually might be pretty competitive, because I think these can headshot. I'm pretty sure throwing knives can headshot. Yeah, it's basically the same base damage as like the bow. So the bow does have much lower base damage than the crossbow. So it's less burst, it consumes stamina, but it does fire faster. And I do think it is okay at boss fights, but it's not nearly as good at boss fights as the crossbow. Because under pressure, burning out of stamina sucks, and that can get you killed easily. So what rating would I give the bow? So because you can't really recover that many arrows for some reason, and it does seem kind of bugged in that regard, the reusability on arrows seems to be worse than crossbow bolts, because I recover crossbow bolts from enemies all the time when I headshot them or just shoot them in general. So until that's addressed, I do have to rate it lower than the crossbow for sure. So the last video, I gave the crossbow an 8.5. For this video, I think I'm going to give the bow like a 7.5. It's good against weaker enemies, but melee weapons are really your bread and butter for dealing with those. It can be decent at dealing with ranged threats, but if the ranged threats have like a helmet or high health, it's not going to be one-shotting them. And then in boss fights, when you're under pressure, it's not going to be nearly as good because you have to burn through stamina to use it. And also the damage per shot is lower, so you have to land more shots. And the big thing in this game, or at least in my opinion, is burst damage. And the more burst damage you have access to, the better. Damage over time is also good. You can combine them for great effect. So the bow doesn't really do either of those things. It doesn't have damage over time, and it doesn't really have burst damage. Now, there are the fire arrows and everything, but Molotovs outperform those, and that's true for the bow and the crossbow. So the fact that you don't have as much burst damage on demand does hurt it, in my opinion. Now, against, like, scavengers, the bow is good. So, like, you can see here, like, these unhelmeted dudes, totally great. That's where the bow shines. But against helmeted enemies, because you need to hit them twice, it does suffer. It's much easier to shoot something once than to shoot it twice, because you have to land 2 consecutive shots, and, you know, you can miss and so on. So for those reasons, you know, I think the bow is decent. It's good against unarmored humans, for sure, and unarmored zombies and low-health zombies, but against anything with a higher health pool, it's definitely not as good, and it can't one-shot as many things as the crossbow. So that is it for this one. Definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, found this useful. If you think I'm off on anything, just make an argument as to why, and make sure you back it up with numbers and data, and you can convince me to up the rating, because maybe I'm missing something. But yeah, that's it for this one. Thanks for checking this out. I'll see you guys next one. Peace.